Part 1. The Gathering Shadows. The village of Skogr clung to the edge of the fjord like a stubborn barnacle on the hull of a longship. Winter in this remote corner of Norway was not a season, but a siege. The sun, a pale ghost, glimpsed only fleetingly at midday, offering little comfort against the relentless cold that gnawed at the bones and froze the breath in your lungs. The wind, howling down from the ice-capped peaks, rattled the shutters of the sturdy wooden houses and whipped the fjord into a frenzy of whitecaps. Life in Skogr was a constant battle against the elements, a struggle for survival that had forged its people into a hardy and resilient breed. They were descendants of Vikings, their blood infused with the spirit of the sea and the strength of the mountains. Yet, even the most seasoned warrior knew to tread carefully in the face of the unseen forces that lurked in the shadows of the long winter nights. Astrid, daughter of Jarl Bjorn, the village chieftain, was a creature of the wild, her spirit as untamed as the land itself. Her laughter, clear and bright as the ice crystal that clung to her eyelashes, was a rare spark of joy in the bleak winter landscape. While others huddled around the earth fires, she would venture out into the biting wind, her footsteps leaving fleeting imprints on the pristine snow. She was a fearless explorer, her curiosity as boundless as the frozen wilderness that surrounded her. One evening, as the aurora borealis shimmered across the sky like a celestial serpent, Astrid felt an irresistible pull towards the ancient forest that bordered the village. It was a place of whispers and shadows, a place where the villagers claimed the old gods still lingered, their power woven into the gnarled branches and moss-covered stones. Her father, a man of tradition and wisdom, had warned her countless times to stay clear of the forest depths. But tonight, the allure was too strong to resist. With a fur cloak wrapped tightly around her shoulders, and a sense of trepidation mingling with excitement, Astrid slipped away from the village, her footsteps muffled by the thick blanket of snow. The forest welcomed her with an eerie silence, a stark contrast to the howling wind that whipped at the treetops. The air was heavy with the scent of pine needles and damp earth, a primal aroma that spoke of ancient secrets and forgotten magic. As she ventured deeper, the trees seemed to close in around her, their skeletal branches reaching out like grasping claws. The moonlight filtering through the dense canopy cast long, distorted shadows that danced and writhed like restless spirits. Astrid felt a prickling sensation on her skin, a feeling of being watched, of being hunted by unseen eyes. A sudden gust of wind rustled through the branches, sending a flurry of snow cascading down around her. Astrid shivered, not from the cold, but from a growing sense of unease. She quickened her pace, her heart pounding in her chest, a primal fear stirring within her. Then she saw it, a clearing bathed in an unnatural light, a beacon in the heart of the oppressive darkness. In the center stood a monolithic stone, its surface etched with runes that shimmered with an otherworldly glow. The air around the stone crackled with energy, a palpable force that drew Astrid towards it like a moth to a flame. Hesitantly she approached, her footsteps crunching on the frozen ground. As she drew closer, the runes seemed to writhe and twist, their glow intensifying, casting eerie shadows that danced around her feet. A low hum emanated from the stone, vibrating through her body, resonating with something deep within her soul. Astrid, her curiosity now battling with a growing sense of dread, reached out a trembling hand towards the stone. As her fingers brushed against its icy surface, a jolt of energy surged through her, leaving her breathless and disoriented. The humming intensified, filling her head with a cacophony of whispers, voices that spoke in a language she didn't understand, yet somehow felt intimately familiar. And then a single voice, cold and ancient, cut through the chaos, its words echoing in the depths of her mind. You have awakened me, and now you shall be mine. Part 2. The Unseen Burden. The touch of the stone, the chilling whisper, the feeling of unseen eyes upon her. It all coalesced into a wave of terror that sent Astrid fleeing back through the forest. The shadows seemed to stretch and grasp at her heels, the wind moaning like a chorus of lost souls. She didn't stop running until she burst out of the tree line, the familiar sight of Skogr's flickering firelight, offering a fragile sanctuary. But the forest had woven its tendrils into her, and she was no longer the same Astrid who had ventured into its depths. The whispers, though fainter now, lingered in the back of her mind, a constant, unsettling hum beneath the surface of her thoughts. Sleep offered no escape, her dreams invaded by fragmented images of the rune-carved stone, its glow seeping into her very being. A subtle shift occurred in Astrid's demeanor. The boundless energy that had once defined her seemed to wane. Her laughter, once a constant refrain, became less frequent, her smile strained. A shadow of melancholy settled over her, a weariness that no amount of sleep could dispel. Her father, Jarl Bjorn, with a father's keen eye, noticed the change in his daughter. He saw the flicker of fear in her eyes, the way she flinched at sudden noises, the way she would stare into the fire for hours, lost in troubled thoughts. He questioned her, but Astrid, unable to articulate the creeping dread that consumed her, simply brushed it aside as the weariness of winter. Bjorn, a seasoned warrior and leader, was no stranger to the unseen forces that governed their world. He knew the stories of the old gods, the spirits that dwelled in the mountains and forests, the creatures that lurked in the depths of the fjord. He had always been a pragmatic man, relying on his strength and courage to face any threat. But now a gnawing fear took root in his heart, a fear that something sinister had touched his beloved daughter. He sought the counsel of the village elder, a woman named Solveig, whose wisdom was as ancient and deep as the roots of the oldest pine. Solveig, with her weathered face and eyes that seemed to hold the secrets of the ages, listened intently as Bjorn described Astrid's strange behavior. When he finished, Solveig remained silent for a long moment, her gaze fixed on the flickering flames of the hearth. Finally she spoke, her voice raspy with age. There is a darkness clinging to her, Jarl Bjorn, a shadow that has taken root in her soul. Bjorn's heart sank. What can be done? He asked, his voice laced with desperation. Solveig's eyes met his, a flicker of sadness in their depths. The ways of the spirit are not always clear, she said. But we must try to protect her. We must shield her from the darkness that seeks to consume her. Together they devised a plan. Protective runes were carved into the doorposts of Astrid's dwelling, and amulets of warding were hung around her neck. Solveig brewed potential herbal concoctions, their bitter taste, meant to ward off evil spirits. The shaman was summoned to perform cleansing rituals, his rhythmic chanting filling the air with the scent of burning sage and juniper. But despite their efforts, the darkness continued to grow within Astrid. The whispers intensified, twisting her thoughts and poisoning her dreams. She felt an increasing isolation, a growing chasm between her and the rest of the village. The laughter of children, once a source of joy, now grated on her nerves. The warmth of human touch, once comforting, now felt repulsive. Astrid, once the vibrant heart of Skogr, was slowly becoming a stranger in her own home. The curse, like a creeping vine, was tightening its grip, drawing her further into the shadows, towards a fate that none could foresee. Part 3. The Festering Seed. The whispers no longer merely whispered, they coiled around Astrid's thoughts, worming their way into her waking moments, a constant murmur that threatened to drown out the familiar sounds of her world. The laughter of children, the clang of the blacksmith's hammer, the crackling of the hearth fire, all seemed distant and muted, as if heard through a thick wall of ice. Sleep offered no escape. Her dreams were a swirling vortex of disturbing imagery. The rune-covered stone pulsating with an eerie green light, the gnarled branches of the ancient forest reaching for her like skeletal fingers, and those grotesque figures, their faces obscured by shadow, chanting in a language that chilled her to the bone. Astrid's once vibrant spirit began to wither, like a flower deprived of sunlight. She found it increasingly difficult to summon the energy to participate in the daily rhythms of the village. The chores that had once been a source of pride, hauling water from the well, tending to the livestock, weaving intricate patterns into the loom, now felt like insurmountable burdens. Her appetite waned, and her once rosy cheeks grew pale and gaunt. Her laughter, once a familiar melody in Skogr, became a rare and brittle sound, quickly swallowed by the ever-present wind. A haunted look settled in her eyes, a distant, unfocused gaze that seemed to peer beyond the veil of the physical world. The villagers, a close-knit community bound by the harsh realities of their existence, noticed the change in Astrid. Whispers circulated, hushed conversations filled with concern and a growing unease. Others of a curse brought on by her reckless venture into the forbidden forest. Solveig, the village elder, watched Astrid with a heavy heart. She saw the darkness that clung to the young woman, a shadow that deepened with each passing day. She knew that the whispers were more than just idle gossip. They were a reflection of a truth that none dared to speak aloud. One evening, as the aurora borealis painted the sky with its ethereal dance of light, Solveig summoned Astrid to her hut. The fire crackled in the hearth, casting flickering shadows on the walls, as Solveig studied the young woman's face, searching for a glimmer of the vibrant spirit she once knew. "Astrid," she began, her voice gentle but firm. "There is a darkness within you, a coldness that chills your soul." Astrid, startled by the directness of Solveig's words, tried to deny it. But the words caught in her throat. She couldn't deny the truth of what Solveig saw, the truth that she herself felt gnawing at her from within. "I don't understand," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I feel different, distant, as if a part of me is missing." Solveig nodded, her eyes filled with understanding. "The forest holds many secrets, Astrid, secrets that can both bless and curse. It seems you have stumbled upon one of its darker secrets." Astrid's heart pounded in her chest. She remembered the rune-covered stone, the chilling whisper, the feeling of being marked. "The stone," she breathed. "The voice." Solveig's gaze intensified. "The stone is a gateway, Astrid, a portal to a realm beyond our understanding. And the voice, it is the voice of something ancient and malevolent, something that has taken root within you." Fear washed over Astrid, a cold wave that threatened to drown her. She looked to Solveig, her eyes pleading for answers, for hope. "Can it be undone?" she asked, her voice trembling. Solveig's face was etched with a deep sadness. "The ways of the spirits are not always clear, child. But we will fight this darkness together. We will not let it consume you." And so began a desperate struggle against the encroaching darkness. Solveig, with her knowledge of ancient lore and herbal remedies, worked tirelessly to cleanse Astrid's spirit. The shaman performed rituals, chanting incantations and burning sacred herbs, hoping to drive away the evil that had taken hold. But the curse, it seemed, was relentless. It resisted their efforts, its grip tightening with each passing day. Astrid felt herself slipping away, her connection to the world around her
growing weaker, the whispers in her mind growing louder. The villagers, sensing the futility of their efforts, began to fear for their own safety. They watched Astrid with suspicion, their whispers turning into murmurs of dread. The once beloved chieftain's daughter was now seen as a harbinger of misfortune, a potential threat to their community. Astrid, sensing their fear and rejection, retreated further into herself, her isolation feeding the darkness that consumed her. The whispers, once a distant murmur, now roared in her ears, promising power and revenge against those who had cast her out. The transformation was nearing its completion. The creature within was about to break free.
Part 4. The Isolation. The whispers intensified, no longer a mere murmur, but a cacophony of voices vying for dominance within Astrid's mind. They hissed and snarled, promising power and vengeance, urging her to embrace the darkness that pulsed beneath her skin. Sleep became a battlefield, where grotesque visions clashed with fragmented memories of her former life. She would wake with a gasp, her heart pounding, the chilling echo of the whispers clinging to the edges of her consciousness. The physical changes, once subtle, became more pronounced. Her skin, once kissed by the sun, took on a sickly pallor, a greenish tinge that made the villagers recoil. Her eyes, once the vibrant blue of the fjord, now held a disturbing luminescence, the pupils dilated and black as night. Her hair, her crowning glory, began to fall out in clumps, leaving patches of her scalp bare and exposed. The villagers, their initial concern now replaced by fear and revulsion, began to shun Astrid. Mothers pulled their children away when she approached, and whispers followed her like a shadow. Even her closest friends, those who had shared laughter and secrets with her, now kept their distance, their eyes filled with a mixture of pity and apprehension. Astrid, sensing their fear and rejection, retreated further into isolation. She spent her days wandering the outskirts of the village, her footsteps leading her ever closer to the forbidden forest, the source of her torment. The whispers welcomed her solitude, feeding her growing resentment towards the villagers who had cast her out. One day, while gathering herbs near the edge of the forest, Astrid encountered a group of children playing. They stopped their game and stared at her, their eyes wide with fear. One of them, a young boy with a mischievous grin, pointed at her and shouted, "Look at the monster!" The other children joined in, their taunts echoing through the trees. Astrid, her heart filled with a bitter rage, lunged at them, her hands outstretched. The children screamed and scattered, their laughter replaced by terror. Astrid, her breath coming in ragged gasps, watched them flee, a twisted smile spreading across her lips. The whispers in her mind roared their approval, praising her for embracing the darkness. She felt a surge of power, a thrill of control that she had never experienced before. That night, as the village slept, Astrid slipped away from her home. She walked towards the forest, her footsteps guided by the whispers, her heart filled with a dark purpose. She knew that she could no longer remain in Skogr, a place where she was feared and despised. The forest with its shadows and secrets beckoned her, promising a refuge where she could embrace the creature she was becoming. As she entered the forest, the trees seemed to part before her, their branches reaching out like welcoming arms. The whispers grew louder, urging her onward, deeper into the heart of the darkness. Astrid, her spirit broken, but her resolve hardened, followed their call, her fate intertwined with the ancient evil that slumbered within the forest's depths. Part 5. The Embrace of Shadows. The deeper Astrid ventured into the forest, the more she felt a sense of perverse belonging. The whispers, once a torment, now became a symphony of promises, weaving a tapestry of power and acceptance. They spoke of ancient rituals, of forgotten gods, and of a transformation that awaited her in the heart of the darkness. The forest itself seemed to respond to her presence. The trees, gnarled and ancient, leaned towards her as she passed, their branches brushing against her like ghostly caresses. The shadows danced and writhed, forming fleeting shapes that mimicked her movements, as if the very darkness itself was becoming an extension of her being. The air grew thick with an otherworldly energy, a palpable force that pulsed with the rhythm of Astrid's corrupted heart. The scent of pine needles and damp earth was replaced by a cloying sweetness, a sickly perfume that clung to her nostrils and made her head spin. As she journeyed deeper, the whispers guided her towards a hidden path, a trail barely visible beneath the thick carpet of moss and fallen leaves. The path led her to a clearing, bathed in an eerie green light that emanated from a fissure in the earth. A swirling mist rose from the fissure, carrying with it the stench of decay and a faint echo of chanting voices. Astrid, her senses heightened by the curse, felt a pull towards the fissure, an irresistible urge to peer into the abyss that beckoned her. She knelt at the edge, her gaze drawn to the swirling mist, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and anticipation. As she peered into the depths, the chanting grew louder, the voices weaving a spell that bound her to the darkness. The mist parted, revealing a glimpse of a subterranean chamber, its walls adorned with grotesque carvings and flickering torches. In the center of the chamber, a cauldron bubbled and hissed, its contents glowing with an infernal light. Astrid, her will weakened by the curse's influence, felt herself drawn towards the chamber, her body moving as if guided by an unseen force. She descended into the fissure, the whispers echoing around her, urging her onward, deeper into the heart of the earth. The chamber, damp and cold, pulsed with an evil energy. The chanting intensified, the voices now a cacophony of whispers and guttural growls. The figures that danced around the cauldron, their forms distorted and grotesque, beckoned Astrid towards them, their eyes burning with an unholy light. Astrid, her mind clouded by the curse, felt a sense of belonging in this unholy place. The whispers promised her power, a release from the pain and isolation she had endured. They offered her a place among them, a place where she would be accepted, where she would be revered. With a trembling hand, Astrid reached out towards the cauldron, her fingers brushing against its cold, metallic surface. The chanting reached a fever pitch, the voices merging into a single deafening roar. The cauldron's contents surged and bubbled, the infernal light intensifying until it filled the chamber with a blinding radiance. Astrid, her senses overwhelmed, felt the curse's power surging through her, transforming her, remaking her in its own image. Her body contorted, her bones cracking and reforming, her skin taking on a sickly green hue. Her eyes, now glowing with an eerie light, reflected the monstrous transformation that had taken hold. Astrid was no more. In her place stood a creature of darkness, a bringer of fear and despair, a vessel for the ancient evil that had slumbered beneath the earth for centuries. The curse had claimed its victim, and the village of Skogr would soon face the consequences. Part 6. The First Strike. The transformation was complete. Astrid, the girl who loved the sun on her face and the wind in her hair, was gone. In her place stood a creature of the night, its form warped and twisted, its eyes burning with an unholy light. The whispers that had once tormented her now surged through her veins, a symphony of power and malice. The creature emerged from the fissure, its footsteps silent on the forest floor. The trees seemed to bow before it, their branches parting to create a path through the dense undergrowth. The shadows danced and writhed, eager to serve their master. The creature's first victim was a lone hunter, venturing too deep into the forest in search of game. He heard a rustle in the underbrush, a snapping twig that sent a shiver down his spine. He turned, his hand instinctively reaching for his axe, but it was too late. The creature lunged from the shadows, its claws raking the hunter's face. Tearing through flesh and bone, the hunter's scream echoed through the trees. A desperate cry that was quickly swallowed by the oppressive silence of the forest. The creature feasted on the hunter's fear and despair, its hunger growing with each kill. It stalked the forest edge, its presence a palpable darkness that seeped into the village of Skogr. The villagers, their unease growing into full-blown terror, barricaded their doors and huddled around their fires, their whispers turning into prayers for protection. The chieftain, his heart heavy with grief and guilt, knew that he had failed to protect his daughter, and now his people were paying the price. One night, as the aurora borealis painted the sky with its eerie glow, the creature breached the village walls. It moved with an unnatural speed, its form a blur against the snow-covered landscape. The first to fall was a young woman, venturing out to fetch water from the well. She heard a guttural growl behind her, and as she turned, the creature's claws tore into her throat, silencing her scream before it could escape her lips. Panic erupted in the village. The men grabbed their weapons, their faces grim with determination, while the women and children huddled in fear, their cries echoing through the narrow streets. The chieftain, his axe held high, led the charge against the creature. He fought with the ferocity of a cornered wolf, his every blow fueled by a desperate hope to protect his people and avenge his daughter. But the creature was too powerful. It swatted aside the villagers' attacks with ease, its claws tearing through the flesh and bone, its laughter a chilling mockery of their fear. The battle raged through the night, the village streets stained with blood, and the air thick with the stench of death. One by one, the villagers fell, their cries of despair swallowed by the howling wind. The massacre at Skogr was swift and brutal. The creature, fueled by the dark power that now coursed through its veins, moved with a terrifying swiftness, its claws tearing through flesh and bone with ease. The villagers, caught unprepared, fought with the courage born of desperation, but their weapons were no match for the creature's supernatural strength and ferocity. The screams of the dying echoed through the night, mingling with the creature's triumphant roars and the crackling of flames as it set fire to the huts, turning the once peaceful village into a blazing inferno. The chieftain Bjorn fought with the fury of a berserker, his axe cleaving the air, but even his legendary strength was no match for the monstrous being that had once been his daughter. He fell with a final defiant roar, his body pierced by the creature's claws, his eyes locking with its glowing orbs as the life drained from him. The creature, its thirst for blood momentarily quenched, surveyed the carnage, its laughter a chilling echo in the wind. Skogr, the village that had endured centuries of harsh winters and Viking raids, was no more. Its inhabitants lay scattered among the burning wreckage, their faces frozen in expressions of terror and despair. The creature, its mission of destruction complete, turned its back on the smoldering ruins and vanished into the darkness, leaving behind a trail of death and devastation. News of the massacre spread like wildfire through the surrounding lands, carried by terrified survivors who had managed to escape the carnage. Fear gripped the hearts of the neighboring villages, their people barricading their homes and praying to the gods for protection. The creature, now known as the Scourge of Skogr, roamed the land, its hunger insatiable, its thirst for blood unquenchable. It stalked the shadows, its presence heralded by a chilling cold and the whispers of the wind. Villages were abandoned, their inhabitants fleeing in terror, leaving behind ghost settlements haunted by the creature's lingering presence. The land itself seemed to mourn the loss of Skogr, the once vibrant forest now shrouded in an oppressive gloom. The animals fled, their instincts warning them of the danger that lurked in the shadows. Even the aurora borealis, once a source of wonder and beauty, now seemed to dance with a sinister energy, its shimmering lights reflecting the creature's malevolent gaze. The whispers once confined to Astrid's tormented mind now echoed across the land, carried on the wind, a chilling reminder of the darkness that had been unleashed. The curse, once a localized affliction, had become a plague, spreading its tendrils of fear and despair across the once peaceful realm. And as the scourge of Skogr continued its reign of terror, the people of Norway trembled, their hopes dwindling with each passing day. The question was not whether the creature could be stopped, but whether there was anything left to save. Part 7. The Whispers Spread. The fall of Skogr sent ripples of terror throughout the land. Whispers of the massacre, carried by the wind and the panicked flight of refugees, reached even the most isolated settlements. Fear, like a contagion, spread faster than any disease, infecting the hearts of the bravest warriors and the wisest elders. The creature, once Astrid, now a nameless abomination, reveled in the chaos it wrought. It stalked their land, a predator without mercy, its presence heralded by a chilling cold that seeped into the bones, and a silence so profound it seemed to suffocate the very air. Villages that had once thrived, bustling with life and laughter, now stood abandoned, their hearts cold, their doors hanging open like gaping wounds. Fields lay fallow, crops rotting in the ground, as farmers fled their homes, seeking refuge in the mountains or the relative safety of larger settlements. The once familiar rhythms of life were disrupted, replaced by a constant state of fear and uncertainty. Hunters, once proud providers for their families, now feared to venture into the forests, their prey replaced by a predator far more deadly. Fishermen, their livelihoods tied to the bounty of the sea, cast their nets with trembling hands, their eyes constantly scanning the horizon for any sign of the creature's approach. Even the bravest warriors, their hearts hardened by countless battles, felt a tremor of fear when the wind carried the whispers of the creature's name. They knew that their swords and axes were no match for the supernatural power that now coursed through its veins. The whispers, once confined to the depths of the forest, now echoed across the land, carried on the wind, seeping into the dreams of the innocent and the nightmares of the guilty. They spoke of a darkness that consumed all, a hunger that could never be sated, a despair that knew no bounds. The curse, once a localized affliction, had become a plague, infecting the very soul of Norway. The land itself seemed to wither under its touch, the once vibrant forest turning grey and lifeless, the rivers running sluggish and cold. And as the creature continued its reign of terror, the people of Norway prayed for a savior, a hero who could rise from the ashes of their despair and banish the darkness that threatened to consume them all. But hope, like the sun in the depths of winter, seemed a distant and fading memory. The whispers, no longer confined to the ruined village of Skogr, slithered through the valleys and over the mountains, carried on the icy breath of the north wind. They reached the ears of farmers tending their meager crops, hunters stalking elk through the snow-laden forests, and fishermen casting their nets into the churning fjord. Fear, a cold, insidious serpent, coiled around the hearts of the people, poisoning their dreams and casting a shadow over their waking hours. The tale of Skogr's destruction spread like wildfire, each retelling growing more gruesome, more terrifying. The creature, once Astrid, was now spoken of in hushed tones, a nameless abomination, a demon spawned from the darkest depths of their folklore. Parents clutched their children closer, warriors sharpened their blades with grim determination, and even the bravest among them felt a shiver of dread when the wind howled through the long winter nights. The land itself seemed to reflect the growing despair. The sun, already a rare visitor in this northern realm, seemed to retreat further, its light swallowed by perpetual twilight. The snow, once a pristine blanket covering the land, now appeared stained with a subtle grayness, as if the very earth was absorbing the darkness that had been unleashed. In the village of Bjorgwin, nestled at the foot of a towering mountain, the news of Skogr's fate struck a particularly chilling chord. Bjorgwin was home to Leif, a young warrior who had once been betrothed to Astrid. He had left Skogr months earlier, seeking his fortune as a member of a Viking raiding party. Now the news of his beloved village's destruction and the monstrous transformation of his childhood sweetheart shattered his world. Leif, consumed by grief and guilt, abandoned his raiding party and returned to Bjorgwin, his heart heavy with a burden of sorrow and a burning desire for vengeance. He found his village gripped by fear, the villagers wary of any stranger, their eyes filled with suspicion and despair. He sought the counsel of the village elder, a wise woman named Freya, known for her wisdom and her connection to the spirit world. Freya, her face etched with the lines of countless winters, listened intently as Leif recounted the horrors he had heard. "The curse has spread," she said, her voice grave. "The darkness that consumed Astrid has taken root in the land, and it will not rest until it has devoured all that is good and pure." Leif, his eyes blazing with anger and determination, gripped the hilt of his sword. "I will not stand idly by while this evil consumes our world," he declared. "I will hunt down this creature, this abomination that was once Astrid, and I will avenge the fallen." Freya, her gaze filled with a mixture of sadness and admiration, placed a hand on Leif's shoulder. "The path you choose is fraught with peril, young warrior," she warned. "The creature you seek is no ordinary beast. It is fueled by a darkness beyond our comprehension."
"I do not fear the darkness," Leif replied, his voice firm. "I have faced it before, and I will face it again. For Astrid, for Skogr, for the sake of our people, I will not rest until this evil is vanquished." And so, Leif, armed with his sword, his grief, and his unwavering determination, set out on a perilous journey to hunt down the beast of Skogr, a journey that would lead him into the heart of darkness and test the very limits of his courage and his humanity.
Part 8. The Weight of Whispers. Leif, driven by a grief that burned like a wildfire in his soul, journeyed across the ravaged landscape. The once familiar paths were now shrouded in an eerie silence, the laughter of children replaced by the mournful cries of ravens circling overhead. Each abandoned farmstead, each empty village was a fresh wound on the land, a testament to the creature's insatiable hunger. The whispers followed him, a constant reminder of the darkness that had consumed Astrid and shattered his world. They slithered into his dreams, twisting his memories of her into grotesque parodies, her laughter echoing with a chilling malice. He would wake with a start, his heart pounding, the icy grip of fear tightening around his chest. But Leif refused to succumb to despair. He clung to the memory of Astrid's smile, her kindness, the fire that had burned within her spirit. He would avenge her, not just for her sake, but for the sake of all those who had fallen victim to the creature's wrath. He sought out the wise woman Freya, the seer of Bjorgwin, hoping to glean some insight into the creature's weaknesses, some way to combat the darkness that had consumed it. Freya, her eyes clouded with sorrow, warned him of the perilous path he had chosen. "The creature is no longer your Astrid," she said, her voice heavy with foreboding. "It is a vessel of ancient evil, its power fueled by the despair and suffering it inflicts." "But there must be a way," Leif pleaded, his voice raw with desperation. "There must be a way to break the curse, to free Astrid from this torment." Freya remained silent for a long moment, her gaze fixed on the flickering flames of the hearth. Finally she spoke, her voice barely a whisper. "There is a legend," she said, "a tale passed down through generations of a weapon forged in the heart of a dying star, a blade imbued with the power to banish darkness. It is said to be hidden in a place where the veil between worlds is thinnest, a place guarded by spirits and shrouded in ancient magic." Leaf's eyes lit up with a glimmer of hope. "Where can I find this weapon?" he asked, his voice filled with renewed determination. Freya pointed towards the north, where the mountains pierced the sky like jagged teeth. "Beyond the frozen peaks," she said, "lies a hidden valley, a place known as the Whispering Glade. There, amidst the ancient stones and the swirling mists, you will find the weapon you seek." Leaf, his heart filled with a newfound purpose, thanked Freya and set off on his quest. He journeyed north, his footsteps crunching on the frozen ground, the wind whipping at his furs, his eyes fixed on the distant peaks that beckoned him onward. The journey was arduous, the terrain treacherous. He battled blizzards that threatened to bury him alive, scaled icy cliffs that tested his strength and agility, and navigated treacherous crevasses that yawned like hungry mouths. But Leaf, driven by his grief and his unwavering determination, pressed on, his spirit unyielding. He knew that the fate of his people and the hope of saving Astrid rested on his shoulders. As he approached the Whispering Glade, the air grew heavy with an otherworldly presence. The whispers, once a distant murmur, now swirled around him, their voices a chorus of warnings and temptations. The shadows danced and writhed, taking on monstrous shapes that tested his courage. But Leaf, his heart filled with a burning resolve, pressed on, his footsteps echoing in the eerie silence of the glade. He knew that he was nearing his destination, the place where he would find a weapon that could vanquish the darkness and bring an end to the creature's reign of terror. Part 9. The Whispering Glade. The ascent was relentless. Each step upward was a battle against the biting wind that tore at Leaf's furs and the treacherous ice that coated the mountain path. His breath rose in ragged plumes, freezing in the air before dissipating into the swirling mists that clung to the peaks. The muscles in his legs burned with exhaustion, and his lungs ached with the thin, frigid air. But Leaf refused to yield. The image of Astrid, her face twisted in agony, her eyes vacant and lifeless, fueled his every stride. The whispers that haunted him, once a distant murmur, now roared in his ears, a cacophony of voices that taunted him with his failure, with the loss of his beloved, with the despair that threatened to consume him. He pushed aside the whispers, clinging to the embers of hope that Freya's prophecy had ignited within him. Somewhere in this desolate landscape, amidst the towering peaks and shrouded valleys, lay the Whispering Glade.
A place of ancient power where a weapon awaited him. A weapon that could break the curse and offer a chance to reclaim Astrid from the clutches of darkness. The landscape grew increasingly hostile as he climbed higher. The once towering pines gave way to stunted gnarled trees, their branches twisted into grotesque shapes, as if frozen in a silent scream. The snow, once pristine white, was now stained with a sickly grey, the remnants of blizzards that had raged for weeks, their fury a reflection of the turmoil within Leif's own soul. He felt a growing sense of isolation, a detachment from the world he knew. The familiar sounds of the forest, the chirping of birds, the rustling of leaves, the crackling of twigs underfoot, were replaced by an oppressive silence, broken only by the howling wind, and the whispers that gnawed at his sanity. Days blurred into nights, the sun a pale ghost that offered little warmth or comfort. Leif's body ached, his spirit weary, but he pressed on, driven by a force that transcended physical exhaustion. He had to reach the glade, he had to find the weapon, he had to save Astrid. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he crested the summit of a wind-swept pass. Below him, shrouded in a swirling mist, lay the whispering glade, a valley of ancient stones and ethereal silence. A sense of foreboding washed over him, a prickling sensation that warned of unseen dangers and ancient powers. He began his descent, each step a descent into the unknown. The whispers intensified, their voices swirling around him like a vortex of despair, their words weaving a tapestry of doubt and fear. Shadow danced at the edge of his vision, taking on monstrous shapes that seemed to mock his every move. But Leaf, his resolve hardened by grief and fueled by a desperate hope, refused to yield. He pushed through the mist, his eyes fixed on the valley below, his heart pounding with a mixture of anticipation and dread. As he entered the glade, the air crackled with an unseen energy, a palpable force that made the hairs on his neck stand on end. The whispers reached a fever pitch, their voices merging into a cacophony of warnings and temptations. Leaf felt the tremor run through him, a primal fear that threatened to consume him. But he pushed it aside, his gaze sweeping across the landscape, searching for the weapon that Freya had described. And then he saw it. In the center of the glade, nestled among a circle of ancient stone, lay a sword, its blade shimmering with an eternal light that pierced the gloom. The sword, its hilt crafted from the bone of a long-dead dragon, pulsed with an energy that resonated deep within Leaf's soul. He knew, with a certainty that defied logic, that this was the weapon he had sought, the key to breaking the curse and restoring balance to the world. But as he took a step towards the sword, the shadows around the stones coalesced, forming a monstrous figure that blocked his path. The creature, its eyes burning with malevolent intent, snarled at Leaf, its voice a guttural growl that echoed through the glade. Leaf, his hand instinctively gripping the hilt of his own sword, felt a surge of adrenaline. He knew that this was the final test, a battle against the guardian of the glade, creature born of the very darkness he sought to vanquish. With a deep breath and a silent prayer to the gods of his ancestors, Leaf raised his sword, preparing to face the monstrous guardian, his heart pounding with a mixture of fear and determination. The fate of his people, the hope of saving Astrid, rested on the outcome of this battle. Part 10. The Guardian's Gaze. The creature that materialized from the shadows was unlike anything Leaf had ever encountered. Even in the darkest corners of his nightmares, he had never seen such a thing. It wasn't formed of flesh and blood, but of the swirling mists themselves, its edges constantly shifting, tendrils of vapor reaching out like grasping claws, its eyes burning with an icy fire, seemed to bore into Leaf's very soul, chilling him to the core. A wave of dizziness washed over him when a low growl, guttural and primal, rumbled from the creature's formless throat. It was a sound that resonated with the ancient power of the glade, a sound that spoke of being far older and more powerful than any mortal man. Leaf, his heart pounding against his ribs like a war drum, tightened his grip on his sword. The blade, forged by the finest smith in Bjorgvin, felt cold and inadequate in his grasp, a mere sliver of metal against the raw power that emanated from the creature. He knew, with a chilling certainty, that this was no ordinary beast. This was a guardian, a protector of the glade and its secrets, a being woven from the very essence of the ancient magic that permeated the valley. The creature lunged, his form a blur of mist and shadow. Leaf, his instincts honed by years of training, reacted instinctively, raising his sword to parry the attack. The blade met nothing but air, the creature's form dissolving into vapor before reforming behind him. A cold dread gripped Leaf's heart. He was facing an enemy that defied the laws of nature, a being that could shift and change at will, a creature born of the very shadows that cloaked the glade. He spun around, his eyes scanning the swirling mists, searching for any sign of the creature. The whispers, which had been a constant presence throughout his journey, now fell silent, replaced by an oppressive silence that amplified the pounding of his own heart. The creature struck again, its claws materializing from mist, raking across Leaf's arm, tearing through his furs and drawing blood. Leaf cried out in pain, stumbling back, his eyes frantically searching for his attacker. He caught a glimpse of the creature's form, a fleeting silhouette against the swirling mists, his eyes burning with a malevolent light. He lunged forward, his sword slashing through the air, but again he met only with empty space. The creature was toying with him, its laughter echoing through the glade, chilling mockery of Leaf's desperate attempts to defend himself. He felt a growing sense of despair, a realization that his strength and skill were no match for this ethereal being. But then a voice, soft and ethereal, cut through the silence. "Leaf," the voice whispered, its tone filled with a gentle sadness. "Do not fight the shadows. Look within." Leaf froze, his sword poised midair. The creature, its attention momentarily diverted, paused its attack, its eyes searching the mists for the source of the voice. Leaf, his heart pounding with a mixture of fear and hope, turned towards the sound, and then saw her. A figure emerged from the swirling mists, her form shimmering with an otherworldly light. Her hair, the color of moonlight, flowed around her like a silver waterfall, and her eyes, pools of ancient wisdom, held a depth that seemed to encompass the very secrets of the glade. The creature, its form flickering and distorting, whimpered and retreated, its shadowy form shrinking back as if in deference to the woman's presence. Leaf, his breath catching in his throat, felt a strange sense of recognition, a feeling that he had known this woman for a lifetime, though he could not place her in his memories. He knew with a certainty that defied logic that she held the key to unlocking the mysteries of the glade, and perhaps the fate of his beloved Astrid.
Part 11. The Lady of the Glade. The woman, her form, shimmering like moonlight on snow, moved with an ethereal grace that seemed to defy the laws of nature. She glided towards Leaf, her feet barely disturbing the frost-covered ground, her eyes fixed on him with an intensity that made his heart pound. The creature, its monstrous form flickering and unstable, whimpered and retreated, its shadowy limbs recoiling, as if burned by the woman's presence. Even the whispers that had tormented Leaf for so long seemed to hush, replaced by an expectant silence that hung heavy in the air. Leaf, his breath catching in his throat, felt a strange sense of recognition, a feeling that he had known this woman for a lifetime, though he couldn't place her in his memories. He knew, with a certainty that defied logic, that she held the key to unlocking the mysteries of the glade, and perhaps the fate of his beloved Astrid. "You seek the blade of Ascardleos," she said, her voice a melodic whisper that echoed through the glade, carrying an ancient cadence that resonated deep within Leaf's soul. He swallowed hard, his voice caught in his throat, and managed a shaky nod. "Yes," he finally croaked, his voice hoarse from the trials of his journey. "I seek the weapon that can vanquish the darkness." The woman's eyes, pools of ancient wisdom, seemed to pierce through him, seeing the turmoil within, the grief, the anger, the desperate hope that flickered like a dying ember. "The blade is not easily earned," she continued, her voice soft yet carrying an undeniable authority. "It is a weapon of great power, forged in the heart of a dying star, imbued with the essence of light and hope. It can banish darkness, but it can also corrupt, its power capable of destroying as easily as it can heal." Leaf, his gaze fixed on the sword that lay nestled among the stones, felt a surge of determination. He had come too far, endured too much, to be deterred now. He would face any challenge, overcome any obstacle, to obtain the weapon that could save his people and free Astrid from the clutches of the curse. "I am prepared to face any trial," he declared, his voice firm, despite the tremor of awe that ran through him. "Tell me what I must do to prove myself worthy." The woman smiled, a sad, knowing smile that seemed to encompass the weight of centuries. The trials are not only of physical strength, young warrior," she said. "They are trials of the spirit, of the heart. You must confront the darkness within yourself, the shadows that lurk in the deepest corners of your soul. Only then can you hope to wield the power of Ascardleos." Leaf, his brow furrowed in confusion, looked at the woman, seeking clarification. "But how?" he asked. "How can I confront the darkness within myself?" The woman's eyes softened. "The path to self-discovery is not an easy one," she said. "It is a journey fraught with pain and uncertainty, but it is a journey that must be taken if you are to fulfill your destiny." She raised her hand, and a swirling mist enveloped Leaf, pulling him into a vortex of visions and memories. She saw glimpses of his past, moments of joy and sorrow, of love and loss. He saw the darkness that lurked within him, the anger, the fear, the despair that threatened to consume him. And then he saw Astrid, her face pale and drawn, her eyes filled with a haunting sadness. He heard her voice, a whisper carried on the wind, pleading for his help, for his love. Leaf, his heart aching with a renewed sense of grief and determination, emerged from the mist, his gaze fixed on the woman who had shown him the depths of his own soul. "I understand," he said, his voice filled with a newfound clarity. "I am ready to face the darkness within me. I am ready to claim the blade of Ascardleos." The woman nodded, her eyes filled with a glimmer of hope. "Then let the trials begin," she said, her voice echoing through the glade. Part 12. The Trial of Shadows. The Lady of the Glade, with a subtle gesture of her hand, seemed to weave the mists around them into a swirling vortex. Leaf felt a strange pull, a sensation of being drawn inward, not physically, but into the depths of his own being. The world around him blurred, the whispering winds and looming stones fading into a hazy backdrop, as a new landscape unfolded within his mind. He found himself standing on a desolate plain, the ground cracked and barren, the sky above a swirling maelstrom of storm clouds. The air was heavy with the scent of decay, a cloying sweetness that clung to his nostrils and made his stomach churn. A chilling wind whipped at his furs, carrying whispers that seemed to claw at his sanity. "This is a place of shadows," a voice echoed within him, a voice that felt both alien and intimately familiar. "A place where your deepest fears take form." Leaf's heart pounded against his ribs like a trapped bird. He gripped the hilt of his sword, the cold steel offering a meager comfort against the overwhelming sense of dread that permeated this desolate realm. From the swirling mists emerged a figure, tall and imposing, its features obscured by shadow. It moved with an unnatural grace, its footsteps silent on the cracked earth. As it drew closer, Leaf felt a wave of icy fear wash over him. A primal instinct warned him of the danger that emanated from this being. "Do you recognize me, Leaf?" the figure hissed, its voice a chilling whisper that seemed to slither into his very soul. Leaf's blood ran cold. He knew that voice, the voice that had haunted his dreams, the voice that had whispered promises of power and vengeance in the depths of the forest. It was the voice of the entity that had consumed Astrid, the voice that now sought to claim him as well. "No," Leaf croaked, his voice barely a whisper against the howling wind. "I will not yield to you." The figure chuckled, a hollow, mocking sound that echoed across the desolate plain. "You cannot escape me, Leaf. I am a part of you. The darkness that lurks within your heart, the grief, the anger, the despair, they are all mine." Leaf felt a surge of those emotions, a tidal wave that threatened to overwhelm him. He saw visions of Skogr engulfed in flames, the faces of his fallen kin twisted in agony, Astrid's vacant eyes staring back at him with an accusing emptiness. "Give in, Leaf," the voice urged, its tone laced with a seductive sweetness. "Embrace the darkness. Join me, and together we will avenge the fallen. We will unleash our fury upon the world, and those who wronged us will pay." Leaf's grip tightened on his sword, his knuckles white with the effort of resisting the creature's seductive whispers. He felt the pull of the darkness, the seductive allure of vengeance, the promise of power that could reshape the world in his image. But then, another voice, faint yet familiar, cut through the chaos. It was Astrid's voice, a whisper of love and hope, a reminder of the woman he had lost, the woman he still yearned to save. "Leave," she whispered, her voice a beacon in the storm of his emotions. "Do not succumb to the darkness. Remember who you are. Remember what you fight for." Leif's heart ached with a bittersweet longing. He saw Astrid's face in his mind's eye, her smile, her laughter, the warmth of her touch. He remembered the bond they shared, the love that had blossomed amidst the harsh beauty of their homeland. He took a deep breath, the icy air filling his lungs, clearing his mind. He would not give in to despair. He would not be consumed by vengeance. He would fight for Astrid, for the light, for the hope of a future where darkness would not prevail. "I will not yield," he declared, his voice ringing with newfound strength. "I will not be your pawn. I will fight for the light, even if it means facing the darkness alone." The figure, its form shifting and distorting in anger, let out a roar that shook the very foundations of the plain. The ground beneath Leif's feet cracked and split, and the shadows around him surged forward, eager to consume him. But Leif, his spirit ignited by a renewed sense of purpose, stood firm. He raised his sword, its blade gleaming in the dim light, a beacon of defiance against the encroaching darkness. The battle for his soul had begun. Part 13. The Clash of Wills. With a roar that echoed across the desolate plain, Leif charged. He moved with a speed and ferocity he didn't know he possessed. His sword a blur of steel in the dim light. The shadowy figure, caught off guard by Leif's sudden aggression, snarled and lunged, its claws outstretched like talons. Leif parried the attack, the clash of steel against shadow sending sparks flying. He pressed his assault, his sword a whirlwind of motion, each strike aimed at the creature's shifting form. The entity, its form flickering and unstable, fought back with a desperate fury, its claws raking the air, its shadowy limbs lashing out like whips. The battle raged, a dance of death beneath the storm-tossed sky. Leif, his senses heightened, felt a strange connection to the blade in his hand. It was as if the sword itself was guiding his movements, its weight perfectly balanced, its edge singing with a power that resonated deep within his soul. He remembered Freya's words, the prophecy of the blade forged in the heart of a dying star, a weapon imbued with the power to banish darkness. Could this be Asgardios, the weapon he had sought for so long? With renewed determination, Leif channeled his grief and anger into his attacks, his every blow fueled by the memory of Astrid and the devastation wrought upon his people. He felt a surge of power coursing through him, a strength that seemed to emanate from the sword itself. The shadowy figure, its form growing increasingly unstable, faltered under Leif's relentless assault. Its attacks grew weaker, its movements less precise. Leif, sensing his advantage, pressed his attack, his sword a beacon of light against the encroaching darkness. With a final desperate lunge, Leif drove his blade deep into the creature's chest. The entity let out a piercing shriek, its form dissolving into a cloud of black mist that swirled and dissipated into the air. Leif stood panting, his sword still raised, the eerie silence of the glade broken only by the pounding of his own heart. He looked around, his gaze falling upon the circle of ancient stones. And there, nestled amongst them, lay a sword, its blade shimmering with an ethereal light. Asgardios! He knew with a certainty that defied logic that this was the weapon he had sought, the weapon that could break the curse and bring hope to a world consumed by darkness. He approached the sword with reverence, his footsteps barely disturbing the grass. As he reached out to grasp the hilt, a surge of energy pulsed through him, a warmth that spread through his veins, invigorating his weary body and soul. The sword felt alive in his grasp, its weight perfectly balanced, its power humming with a vibrant energy that resonated with his very being. He raised the blade, its light illuminating the glade, and a wave of power surged through him. He felt a connection to something ancient and profound, a force that transcended the boundaries of the physical world. He had found Asgardios. The battle for Astrid, for his people,
for the very soul of his world had just begun.
Card 14. The Price of Power. Leaf gripped Asclepios, its hilt cool and smooth against its calloused fingers. The blade thrummed with a vibrant energy, a symphony of light that resonated deep within his soul. He felt a surge of power, a connection to something ancient and vast, a force that seemed to flow from the very heart of the world. He raised the sword, its ethereal glow illuminating the glade, casting long dancing shadows that seemed to shrink back from its radiance. The whispers which had haunted him for so long were silenced, replaced by an expectant hush that held a hint of fear. The lady of the glade nodded, her eyes filled with a mixture of hope and sorrow. "The blade is yours, Leaf," she said, her voice a soft echo in the stillness. "But wield it with caution. Its power is immense, and it can corrupt as easily as it can heal." Leaf, his gaze fixed on the shimmering blade, felt a shiver run down his spine. He knew that the lady's words were true. The power he now held in his hands was unlike anything he had ever encountered, a force that could reshape the world, for good or for ill. He lowered the sword, his mind grappling with the weight of responsibility that had suddenly been thrust upon him. He was no longer just a warrior seeking vengeance. He was the wielder of Asclepios, a champion of light, in a world consumed by darkness. "I will not fail," he vowed, his voice echoing through the glade. "I will use this power to break the curse, to save Astrid, to restore balance to our land." The lady of the glade smiled, a sad, knowing smile that spoke of the trials and sacrifices that lay ahead. "The path you choose is fraught with peril, Leaf," she warned. "The creature you seek is powerful, its darkness deeply rooted in the heart of this world. But I have faith in you. You have the strength, the courage, and the love to overcome this darkness." Leaf, his resolve strengthened by the lady's words, turned his gaze forwards, towards the path that led out of the glade. He knew that the time for preparation was over. The battle for Astrid, for his people, for the very soul of this world had begun. He stepped onto the path, Asclepios held high, its light guiding his way. The whispers returned, their voices now a mixture of fear and respect, as if the very shadows themselves recognized the power he wielded. Leaf journeyed through the forest, his senses heightened, his every step imbued with a newfound purpose. The trees seemed to part before him, their branches bowing in deference to the radiant blade. The creatures of the forest, once wary and elusive, now emerged from their hiding places, their eyes filled with a mixture of curiosity and awe. As he ventured deeper, the whispers grew louder, guiding him towards the creature's lair, a place of darkness and despair, where Astrid was held captive. Leaf felt a surge of anger, a burning desire to confront the entity that had stolen his beloved, to unleash the full fury of Asclepios upon it. But he also felt a growing sense of caution, a realization that the creature was not his only enemy. The darkness that had consumed Astrid had also taken root within him, a shadow that lurked in the depths of his own soul. He knew that he had to be vigilant, to guard against the seductive whispers that tempted him towards vengeance and despair. He pressed on, his resolve unwavering, his heart filled with a love that transcended the boundaries of life and death. He would face the creature, he would break the curse, and he would bring Astrid back from the darkness, even if it meant sacrificing everything he held dear.
Part 15. The Hunter and the Hunted. Leaf emerged from the whispering glade, Asclepios gleaming at his side. The once oppressive forest now seemed to bow before him, the trees parting to create a path, the shadows receding from the radiant light of the blade. He felt a surge of power coursing through him, a connection to the ancient magic that pulsed beneath the earth. But there was no triumph in his heart, only a grim determination. He knew that the true test lay ahead, the confrontation with the creature that had stolen Astrid, the battle to reclaim her from the clutches of darkness. The whispers guided him, their voices no longer filled with malice, but with a cautious respect. They led him through the forest, across desolate plains, and over treacherous mountain passes, always towards the epicenter of the creature's power, a place of chilling cold and suffocating silence. As he journeyed, Leif honed his skills with Asclepius. He practiced wielding the blade, its weight a comforting presence in his hands, its power responding to his very thought and intention. He learned to channel its energy, to summon its light, to unleash its force with a precision that awed and terrified him. He encountered remnants of the creature's devastation along the way. Abandoned villages, ravaged farmsteads, the lingering scent of death and decay. Each encounter fueled his resolve, reminding him of the stakes and the urgency of his quest. One night, as he camped beneath a sky ablaze with stars, the whispers grew frantic, their voices filled with a mixture of fear and excitement. They spoke of the creature's growing power, its insatiable hunger, its relentless pursuit of darkness. Leif knew that he was close, that the final confrontation was imminent. He gripped Asclepius, its blade humming with anticipation, its light casting a protective aura around him. He closed his eyes, focusing his mind, preparing himself for the battle that lay ahead. When he opened his eyes, the landscape had changed. He stood on the precipice of a vast chasm, its depths shrouded in an impenetrable darkness. The air was thick with a malevolent energy, a palpable force that pressed against him, seeking to consume him. The whispers reached a fever pitch, their voices merging into a single deafening roar. And then, from the depths of the chasm, the creature emerged. Its form was a grotesque mockery of Astrid, its once beautiful features twisted and contorted, its eyes burning with an unholy light. It moved with an unnatural speed, its limbs elongated and distorted, its claws raking the air with a chilling hunger. Leif, his heart pounding in his chest, raised Asclepius, its blade gleaming in the darkness. He knew that this was the moment he had been preparing for, the culmination of his journey, the final battle against the darkness that had consumed his world. With a roar that echoed through the chasm, Leif charged, the blade of Asclepius a beacon of light against the encroaching shadows. Part 16. The Abyss Beckons. The chasm yawned before Leif, a gaping maw in the earth that seemed to breathe with a cold, malevolent life of its own. The air itself was thick with a palpable darkness, a suffocating presence that pressed against him, whispering promises of oblivion. The stench of decay rose from the depths, a nauseating blend of rot and something ancient, something foul that stirred a primal fear within him. He gripped Asclepius, its luminous blade a stark contrast to the encroaching shadows. The sword thrummed with a vibrant energy, a beacon of defiance against the abyss that beckoned him forward. He could feel the creature's presence lurking within the chasm, a malevolent force that pulsed with a dark, twisted echo of Astrid's essence. Taking a deep breath, Leif steeled his nerves and began his descent. The path was treacherous, a narrow ledge that clung precariously to the chasm's sheer walls. Loose rocks tumbled into the abyss, their echoing descent a constant reminder of the perilous depths below. The whispers intensified, their voices slithering through the darkness, weaving a tapestry of doubt and fear. They whispered of Astrid's fate, of her suffering, of the creature's power. They tempted Leif with visions of vengeance, urging him to succumb to the darkness, to unleash the full fury of Asclepius and destroy everything in his path. But Leif, his heart anchored by the memory of Astrid's love, pushed aside the whispers. He would not be swayed by their seductive promises. He would not become a creature of vengeance, a harbinger of destruction. He would fight for Astrid, for the light, for the hope of redemption. As he descended deeper, the air grew colder, the darkness more oppressive. The whispers grew louder, their voices morphing into the creature's chilling laughter, a mockery of his hope, a celebration of his impending doom. Then the path opened into a vast cavern, its ceiling lost in the shadows, its floor a treacherous expanse of jagged rocks and icy pools. In the center of the cavern, bathed in an eerie green light, stood the creature, its form a grotesque distortion of Astrid's once beautiful features. His eyes, burning with a malevolent fire, locked onto Leaf, and a wave of nausea washed over him. The creature's presence was a suffocating weight, a tangible manifestation of the darkness that had consumed her. "Leave," it hissed, its voice a guttural rasp that echoed through the cavern. "You have come to join me in my darkness." Leave, his grip tightening on Ascadleos, felt a surge of anger and grief. "I have come to free you, Astrid," he declared, his voice ringing with defiance. "I will break this curse and bring you back from the abyss." The creature let out a chilling laugh, its form shifting and distorting, its limbs elongating into grotesque appendages, its claws glinting in the eerie light. "You are a fool, Leaf," it sneered. "You cannot defeat me. I am the darkness, and I will consume you all." With a roar that shook the cavern walls, the creature lunged, its claws outstretched, its eyes burning with a predatory hunger. Leaf, his heart pounding, raised Ascadleos, its blade a beacon of light against the encroaching darkness. The battle raged, a clash of light and shadow, of hope and despair. Leaf, fueled by his love for Astrid and his unwavering determination, fought with a ferocity he had never known. He parried the creature's attacks, his sword deflecting its claws with a shower of sparks. His movements a blur of motion as he weaved and dodged its relentless assault. The cavern echoed with a clash of steel against claw, the creature's snarl mingling with Leaf's battle cries. The air crackled with energy. The ground trembled beneath her feet as the two forces clashed in a desperate struggle for dominance. Leaf, his strength waning, his body battered and bruised, felt the darkness closing in. The whispers intensified, their voices a chorus of despair, urging him to surrender, to embrace the oblivion that awaited him. But then he saw a flicker of light within the creature's eyes, a spark of Astrid's spirit struggling to break free. He remembered the love they shared, the bond that transcended the boundaries of life and death. And with a renewed surge of determination, he channeled all his strength, all his hope, all his love into Ascadleos. The blade erupted in a blinding flash of light, its power surging through the cavern, striking the creature with a force that sent it reeling. The creature shrieked in agony, its form dissolving and reforming as it struggled against the onslaught of light. Leaf, his vision blurred by the intense radiance, pressed his attack, his sword a whirlwind of motion, each strike aimed at the creature's weakened form. He felt the darkness within the creature receding, its grip on Astrid's soul loosening with every blow. With a final desperate lunge, Leaf plunged Ascadleos deep into the creature's heart. A wave of energy erupted from the blade, shattering the curse that had held Astrid captive. The creature let out a final agonizing wail, its form dissolving into nothingness, leaving behind only a lingering echo of darkness and despair. As the light faded, Leaf collapsed to his knees, his body trembling with exhaustion. He looked up, his gaze searching the cavern, and there, amidst the fading shadows, he saw her. Astrid stood before him, her form whole and unblemished, her eyes filled with the light of life. She looked at Leaf, her face etched with a mixture of confusion and wonder, her voice a whisper that echoed through the cavern. "Leaf?" Leaf, his heart overflowing with a joy he had thought he had lost forever, rose to his feet, his arms outstretched. "Astrid," he breathed, his voice choked with emotion. They rushed towards each other, their embrace a collision of relief and love, a testament to the enduring power of the human spirit against the forces of darkness. In that moment, amidst the echoes of the cavern and the lingering glow of Ascadleos, Leaf knew that he had won. He had faced the abyss, conquered his own demons, and reclaimed the woman he loved from the clutches of an ancient evil. The darkness had been vanquished, and a new dawn was breaking over the land. But as Leaf and Astrid embraced, a cold wind swept through the cavern, extinguishing the last embers of light. A chilling voice echoed through the darkness, a voice that sent shivers down Leaf's spine. "You may have won this battle, Leaf," the voice rasped, "but the war is far from over." Leaf turned to face the source of the voice, his heart sinking, as he saw a dark figure emerge from the shadows. It was the creature, its form reformed, and even more grotesque than before. "You will never truly be free of me, Leaf," the creature hissed, I am part of you now, and I will always be with you. With a final menacing laugh, the creature vanished into the darkness, leaving Leaf and Astrid to face an uncertain future.